On the dawn of March 1st, 1870, a pivotal figure of the Paraguayan War, President Francisco Solano López, stood at the edge of the dense jungle in Cerro Corá, Paraguay. His eyes scanning the horizon, he was all too aware of the bitter end that seemed to be fast approaching. From within the underbrush, the war cries of the Triple Alliance soldiers reverberated, their menacing echoes swirling around him like predatory birds circling their prey. By 7:45 a.m., their ferocious growls of "Down with López" for Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay sent shivers across the Paraguayan landscape, their vehemence striking fear into the hearts of the last remaining Paraguayan soldiers. The normally bustling sounds of Paraguayan camp life was replaced by an eerie silence, punctuated only by the involuntary gasps and shudders of men preparing for what could be their last battle. Among them was Eliza Lynch, López's enigmatic mistress, her gaze a blend of worry and defiance. She played a crucial part in López's resilience, standing by him till the end, her spirit proving to be an unyielding force against the impending doom. It was as if her strength alone was enough to counteract the odds stacked high against Paraguay. At 9:35 a.m., the battle began, but López's hope of holding his ground seemed to falter with each passing minute. The overwhelming forces of the Triple Alliance, their resolve as unyielding as the morning sun, forced López's remaining troops into a corner, pushing them towards an inevitable conclusion. The escalating cries for surrender from his weary men fell on deaf ears. López was resolute. His final stand, fueled by an unbreakable spirit, led to a violent clash that would mark the end of the bloodiest war in Latin America's history. With his last breath, López reportedly shouted, "I die with my country," his final utterance echoing into the jungle, marking the end of an era and the beginning of a long road of recovery for the battered nation. So, how did we reach this poignant climax? What drove López to wage a war against such overwhelming odds? Is there more to López's stubborn resistance, or was it merely a manifestation of his egotistical nature? Join us today on Historical Quarrels as we dissect these questions and delve deep into the compelling story of Francisco Solano López, the War of the Triple Alliance, and the remnants of a nation scarred by war. So, to borrow from the words of a renowned Spanish playwright, Lope de Vega, "Escuchad, señores, escuchad," as we unravel this dramatic chapter of Paraguayan history. All right, everyone, welcome back to Historical Quarrels. I'm your host, Tyler Eckhart. I will be talking about the Paraguayan War today. Before we start, a couple of quick announcements. The interview that I did with the Passion Podcast is going to be coming out this month, sometime. I was alerted by her that there's just some stuff going on in their life that's personal. You know, just stuff happens. Happened with me before where I had to take 6-month hiatus on my show. So I totally get it. But yeah, that should be coming out. So please actually go and check out her show, though. It is super interesting and she interviews a lot of really cool guests. So not saying that I'm really cool, but I'm decent, I guess, decent-ish. Second announcement is we are still doing Stereotypical Podcast. I'm glad that some of you guys have moved over to listen. Would love if more of you guys would be willing to. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty easy for me to do too. It's just something I do with my buddies. We talk and we just go over some different topics. This next week's one will be pretty interesting. And then final announcement is this is going to be the last episode of Historical Quarrels ever. I've realized that I can make more money pulling tricks in the streets, and that is taking up a lot of my time. So I just want to let you guys know that. But if you are interested in, hiring me, you can find me online through the user. I need to stop fucking with you guys like that. I'm just having fun. Quick little disclaimer, though. This show is very NSFW. I go over a lot of sensitive topics, such as death, such as, murder. Sometimes there's rape in here. I also tend to make terrible jokes about some of those subjects, just because that's how I deal with a lot of dark shit, is I tend to make jokes about it. So if it's not for you, then, it's not for you. As I said last episode, do not show this to your grandma unless your grandma is cool. So that being said, let's go ahead and dive deep into this. We're again going to be following the same structure as last time. Except this time it's going to just be one person that we're focusing on as the quarrel kind of develops and grows. But yeah, let's get into it, guys. So a little background information before we begin. As we all know, in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and he gave us a day off of school. The most important thing that he obviously did. He arrived in the New World, and he marked the start of the Spanish colonization period and fucked over a bunch of natives. Paraguay was one of those regions colonized by the Spanish and completely fucked over. It shaped its cultural, political, and societal structures. And then in 1537, the Spanish established Asunción, which became the capital of Paraguay. The city would be a significant factor in shaping the political landscape of Paraguay. Then from 1608 to 1631, the Jesuit missions of Paraguay are established. The Jesuits have a significant impact on Paraguayan culture, education, and governance, shaping the country's values and norms. And then in 1721 to 1735, there was a revolt. The Comunero Revolt takes place in Paraguay, indicating a strong culture of resistance and independence among the Paraguayan people, which would eventually inspire Lopez's nationalism, believing that they were an independent country who didn't need no big other country to come in and help them. They were strong. And then in 1776, the Spanish crown creates the viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata. Paraguay becomes part of this viceroyalty, indirectly influencing the course of Paraguay's independence and its early political life. And finally, in 1811, Paraguay achieves independence from Spain, influenced by the wider revolutionary movements in Latin America. The country's sense of independence and national pride would shape the context in which Lopez would grow up. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, let's get into Lopez's life here. On July 24th of 1827, Francisco Solano López is born in Asunción, Paraguay, to Carlos Antonio López, who at the time was super pissed because he didn't mean to get his wife pregnant, thinking his pullout game was too good, and demanded a DNA test be done. But then Carlos's mother heard about it and beat the shit out of him with a chancla until he apologized to his wife and accepted Francisco as his son, begrudgingly stating, "Ay, mamá, por favor, apúrate de las culpisas. Le voy a aceptar. Ay, no, por favor, no me das la chancla." Which in English translates to, sure thing, mom, or something like that. Anyways, from 1841 to 1852, this decade marked a significant period in the young Francisco Solano López's life. His father, Carlos Antonio López, Paraguay's strongman, recognized the importance of a solid education for his son and heir. He enlisted the guidance of his closest advisors, among whom was a Scottish doctor and surgeon named William Stewart. Stewart's tutelage was a turning point for young Lopez. This is when Francisco realized he really was into white women. And he's like, man, I gotta get me some of them white girls. I don't know why he talked with a southern accent, but he did. Let's just pretend he did. The Scottish physician's worldly knowledge and diversified skill set provided Lopez with a unique educational platform. He learned not only English and French, complementing his native Spanish, but also the intricate strategies of military warfare and the essential principles of medicine. He was a very educated, very smart dude. Meanwhile, Carlos Antonio López was shaping the nation of Paraguay in his own image. He took steps to modernize the country, initiating significant infrastructure projects, such as the Yibiqui Foundry. I think that's going to be like Mayan or like Aztec, like native language before the Spanish came in and, forced them to speak Spanish. Yibiqui. YBYCUI. If anyone knows how to pronounce that, let me know. One of the most important ironworks in the region. He also implemented policies to strengthen Paraguay's military, aware of the brewing tensions with neighboring countries. Carlos Antonio López was also known for his diplomacy, managing to keep Paraguay neutral during the conflicts between the neighboring countries. His emphasis on self-sufficiency and isolation from foreign influence nurtured a sense of nationalism, which was inherited by his son and undoubtedly played a role in the future conflicts that Francisco Solano López would incite. An interesting anecdote from this period revolves around Carlos Antonio López's policy of nomarhuachos, which is a term for nomadic horsemen of the South American plains. He sought to change the national character by creating a more industrious and settled populace. The enforcement of this policy led to stories of huachos being rounded up and given the choice between work or prison, a testament to López's firm hand in shaping the society he desired. He would also routinely shove his fist up their asses, just as like a power play to be like, what are you going to fucking do about it? Huh? My fist is up your ass. As Francisco Solano López grew under his father's regime and Stuart's tutelage, he was shaped by these national developments and his father's leadership style, which would later echo in his own rule and the choices he made leading up to and during the Paraguayan War. During the second year of this decade in 1842, while Francisco was studying, his father Carlos became the most brutal drug lord Paraguay had ever seen. He is thought to have been the inspiration for future Colombian drug cartel leaders who would try to follow in his footsteps. Carlos was known to hang his enemies from their entrails and constantly had a harem of women in his remote island mansion, where he would throw the craziest parties of all time. This is where he would invite kings and queens of different countries and get them to try out the new drugs he was inventing. That's right. He not only was a brutal Paraguayan drug lord, he was also a fucking genius scientist who invented the most common street drugs you hear about today, like crack cocaine, LSD, meth, and many others. He would use this power he gained to eventually be elected president. Or maybe he was just elected president, and he wasn't ever, a scientist/drug lord. But you can never know for sure. Maybe he was secretly controlling things from the shadow for a long time before he decided to step in and, maybe he did it. We don't know. There's no document saying he didn't do it. Anyways, the year 1842 marks a crucial turning point in the political landscape of Paraguay, as well as in the life of young Francisco Solano López. His father, Carlos Antonio López, again ascended to the presidency, which is an office he would hold for over 2 decades, did not have the term limits like America did. President was more of like elected king, essentially. Carlos Antonio López's presidency was characterized by a centralization of power, reflecting his autocratic style. He sought to reinforce Paraguay's independence and sovereignty by limiting foreign influence and promoting national industry, which is actually really good. It really helped out Paraguay for a while. He enacted various reforms such as infrastructure improvements, educational advancements, and military strengthening that sought to modernize Paraguay. Under Carlos Antonio López's rule, Paraguay witnessed a transformation. He oversaw the creation of the country's first railway, improved the capital's urban infrastructure, and established several public schools. Yet, his presidency was also marked by his restrictive control over political freedoms, leading to criticism and resistance. Which, to be fair, I get, it kind of sucks to not have political freedoms, but at the same time, the guy was improving a bunch of shit that Paraguay desperately needed at the time. So it's like, I feel like if I was stuck in a country where it was shit every day and then somebody was making it 100 times better, but I had to lose quite a few freedoms because he was making it 100 times better, I might be okay with it. Maybe. I don't know. It depends. It depends on how many freedoms. Antonio took away quite a few. So there's some give and take there, right? Anyways, Francisco Solano López, observing and learning from his father's reign, was deeply influenced by this autocratic style. He saw his father consolidate power and lead with an iron fist, creating a strong, though very isolated Paraguay. This influence was evident in Francisco's future leadership style and decisions, particularly in his steadfast determination to defend Paraguay's sovereignty, even at the cost of plunging his nation into a devastating war, which we'll get into later. An anecdote from this period showcases Carlos Antonio López's determination to maintain Paraguay's isolation. In the 1850s, he famously declined an offer to construct a telegraph line linking Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, to Buenos Aires, stating, "I would rather have an ox cart tracked to the Gran Chaco than a telegraph line to Buenos Aires." Which, is a pretty big slap in the face. He's like, fuck your country, I hate you. This reflection of Paraguay's insular policy under Carlos Antonio López would leave a lasting impact on Francisco Solano López's worldview and leadership approach. So, moving along to 1853, this year brought a significant shift in the life of the 26-year-old Francisco Solano López. Appointed by his father as a brigadier general in the Paraguayan army, he stepped out of his academic world and into the field of military strategy and leadership. López's new role provided a stage for him to put into practice the lessons of warfare and leadership he'd absorbed from his Scottish tutor, William Stewart. He now had the responsibility and the power to command and lead, a challenge he embraced with a fervor that further demonstrated his ambition and determination. This guy loved every second that he was in charge. Loved it. Probably because he was a power-hungry asshole. One anecdote from this time speaks to López's grit and commitment. It is said that in an effort to modernize and strengthen the Paraguayan army, he would spend hours each day drilling and training his troops. With his troops, not merely directing from the sidelines, but participating in the physical exertions himself. This hands-on approach earned him the respect and loyalty of his soldiers, a crucial element that would later play a significant role during the Paraguayan War. Another noteworthy event, God, I can speak English, during this period was when López led a successful diplomatic mission to Europe between 1853 and 1855. He was dispatched by his father to purchase arms and secure recognition for Paraguay's independence. This mission not only honed his diplomatic skills, but also exposed him to the grandeur and military might of European powers. Observing the splendor of European courts, López developed a fascination for European military traditions and lifestyles, which he sought to replicate in Paraguay. This infatuation with European nobility eventually contributed to his Napoleon complex and self-styling as Marshal President. That was a nickname he gave himself. These experiences, both as a military leader and a diplomat, not only shaped López's perception of power and leadership, but also prepared him for the future challenges he would face as the leader of Paraguay. So in 1855, as part of his European mission, Francisco Solano López arrived in France, and France's grandeur and the powerful legacy of Napoleon Bonaparte left a profound impact on him. It was here, amid the echoing footsteps of Bonaparte, that López found the inspiration that would later influence his style of leadership and his perception of power. From a guy who definitely knew how to use his power, right? Good on you, Napoleon. During his day, López immersed himself in the history and culture of France, paying special attention to the tales of Bonaparte's military genius and charismatic leadership. The tales of Napoleon's reign stirred something within López, intensifying his ambition and molding his vision of a powerful, respected Paraguay. One night, while staying in a grand Parisian hotel, López had a dream that would linger in his consciousness for the rest of his life. In his dream, the spirit of Napoleon Bonaparte visited him, proclaiming López as his destined successor. This ethereal encounter further fueled López's belief in his own destiny to lead and conquer, planting the seeds of his infamous Napoleon complex. Bonaparte, in López's dream, also presented an unusual challenge. He told López that he must learn the remaining lyrics to a specific French song that had eluded his memory. According to Bonaparte, mastering this song would symbolize his readiness to become the greatest commander of all time. Francisco would later say that Napoleon in the dream kept saying something like the song just kind of went like this, like Gobez-moi, avelez-moi, couler sur le côté de moi, weis, vite soit avant de la laisser entrer en moi. Which you had no idea what the fuck meant at the time. It was kind of weird. But, this song would continue to haunt López's dream. It was not just any French song. It was a playful, complex melody whose lyrics had confounded him during his stay in Paris. Despite his efforts, he could not recall the entire song, remembering only the mysterious refrain. Gobez-moi, avelez-moi, couler sur le côté de moi, weis, vite sauter avant de la serre entre moi. Again, just never really sure what that was. But Napoleon in López's dream was adamant. So to realize his destiny as Bonaparte's successor, López must conquer this musical challenge. It became almost an obsession of his. The act of mastering the song was a metaphorical testament to López's readiness to take on the mantle of leadership and military prowess that Napoleon himself had embodied. Obsessed with this spectral message, López dedicated himself to recalling and mastering the song's elusive lyrics. He was often found humming the known parts of this tune, his brows furrowed in deep concentration as he attempted to unlock the missing pieces. Very similar to how Napoleon was said to have been, in his halls, just kind of muttering like specific parts of a song to himself, never really fully doing the song. He'd just kind of like hum and sing maybe 15 words of a song at a time, which is probably why López was never able to figure out what the full lyrics of that song was. Anyways, this peculiar anecdote illustrates not only López's intense ambition and his tendency towards the dramatic, but also adds a touch of whimsy to his character. These traits, along with his belief in his Napoleonic destiny, would later influence his decisions during the Paraguayan War, contributing to his very flamboyant, fearless, and often reckless style of leadership that defined his presidency. The experience of France, and particularly this dream, added the layer of mystique to the divine purpose of López's ambition. So, in 1857, 2 years after all that went down, this year marked a profound shift in the López family dynamics, one that would significantly impact Paraguay's future. Francisco's younger brother, Benil López, unexpectedly passed away. While Francisco was in France, Carlos, Francisco's dad, actually did kind of play for favorites. He was straight up grooming Francisco's younger brother for the presidency. But because Benil died, his untimely death left a void in the political succession plans for the López family. The sudden loss would thrust Francisco Solano López into a new role, that of his father's direct heir apparent. The tragedy, although deeply personal, carried national implications, as it meant Francisco was now the successor to the presidency of Paraguay. Francisco's character and his relationship with his father took a dramatic turn after this event. With the new weight of future leadership on his shoulders, he threw himself into his duty with even more dedication. His ambition took on a sharper edge, and his desire to prove himself worthy of the impending responsibility became even more profound. An interesting anecdote from this period illustrates Francisco's heightened sense of destiny. He would often tell close confidants about a vivid dream he had after his brother's death. In it, he saw himself standing beside the spirit of Napoleon Bonaparte, looking out over a battlefield strewn with the flags of Paraguay's enemies. Napoleon turned to him, pointed at the scene, and said, "Your destiny awaits. Fulfill it, as I fulfilled mine." This dream, along with his visitation dream in Paris, further cemented in Francisco's mind his belief in a Napoleonic destiny, driving him towards the tumultuous leadership he would later enact. Which, could you fucking imagine if the guy who was about to take over the presidency turned to you and was like, "Yeah, so Napoleon visited me, It's like the guy that like everyone kind of knows about and knows is dead, and said, yeah, you're gonna like conquer all of Paraguay's enemies. I would be freaking out. I'd be shitting myself. I'd be on the next boat ride or like horse ride out of that fucking country. I would pretend to be an immigrant and escape, because there's no way in fucking hell I would, work with that psycho. And Francisco would also continually ask around if people knew of any song that had the lyrics of Golbez-moi, abalez-moi, couler le côté de moi, vais vite, soit avant de laisser entre moi, which in Spanish translates to engraname, trágame, gotea por un lado de mí. Sí, rápido, salta antes de que lo dejes entrar dentro de mí. And no one knew what the fuck he was talking about, and began to question his sanity even more. Which, could you imagine that too? If, like, after he talks about this Napoleon shit, he asks you about some like random ass lyrics you've never heard before. 100%. 100%. A lot of his guys should have just fucking left. Oh man, that would have been scary. So in 1860, this year represented another important milestone in the political ascent of Francisco Solano López. His father, President Carlos Antonio López, used his considerable political influence to pass constitutional amendments that would have secured his son's position in the national hierarchy. He named Francisco Solano López as the vice president of Paraguay, placing him just a heartbeat away from the highest office in the land. His actions cemented Francisco's path to the presidency. This was a strategic move, ensuring a smooth transition of power within the López family, and by extension, maintaining the political status quo that Carlos had built over his lengthy tenure. The anointing of Francisco as vice president, however, was not without controversy. His elevation fueled rumors and whispers among political circles and the populace alike. Many questioned the merits of the decision, with the skeptics asserting that Francisco's appointment was more a product of nepotism than of his skills or qualifications. A fucking duh. That's exactly what it was. Yet despite this backlash, Francisco embraced his new role, viewing it as another step in fulfilling his Napoleonic destiny. An interesting anecdote, again, from this period involves Francisco's continued attempts to remember the elusive French song from his dream. As he navigated his political duties, he would often be found humming the tune during meetings or official functions. This tune was found after he sent men out on an expedition to France again to find any, references or any lyrics and musical notes. So they were able to find a part of the tune, which I will play for you here now, as it has been modernized and officially translated. So here is a part of it. Now, what scholars find interesting about the song is how modern a lot of the rhythm became. But besides that, the habit became so renowned for him like humming the tune during meetings and official functions that some of his political allies and adversaries began referring to him teasingly as the singing vice president. This quirk added, again, another layer to his larger-than-life persona that Francisco was beginning to craft for himself, blending his serious political ambitions with an air of eccentricity. People suspect that he might have done it on purpose, just to make him, a little more eccentric, a little more quirky. He's like one of those girls. He's like, oh my God, I'm so quirky. I'm like different. I like hum songs during meetings. That was Francisco. So on September 10th of 1862, this date marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in Paraguay's history. Because ruthless drug cartel leader Carlos Antonio López, the patriarch of the López family, and the driving force behind Paraguay's modernization, breathed his last. It was said that he was out, trying to get some hoes to pay him. Because instead of drugs, he began running tricks, as he found it was easier to sell repeatedly, and he didn't have to cultivate it as much. He could just sell 10, 15, 20 tricks a night, make a lot more money a lot more quickly. But a trick during that time beat the shit out of him and killed him. That, or he just died of age and wasn't like a drug cartel or pimp leader. His death catapulted Francisco to the presidency, and Francisco found himself stepping into the sizable shoes of his formidable father. So he took up the reins of leadership amidst a time of national mourning, yet even as he grieved, he was mindful of the responsibilities he had inherited. Determined to continue his father's policies, Francisco dedicated himself to furthering the modernization of Paraguay, with a particular emphasis on enhancing its military capabilities. Francisco's presidency marked a new direction for Paraguay, driven by his dynamic vision and fortified by his military experience. However, his rule also sparked an era of controversy and conflict, underscored by his increasingly autocratic leadership style and his unwavering belief in his destined greatness. This guy was convinced he was the next Napoleon. He was like, yeah, I got that Napoleon dick. Everyone else doesn't have that Napoleon dick. I can out Napoleon dick anybody with my Napoleon dick. It's a big Napoleon dick, I promise you. He was said to have said that multiple times in his study alone, staring at a mirror. That or, it's just something I came up with because I'm fucking nuts. An actual notable story from the early days of his presidency pertains to his ongoing quest to master the French song from his dreams. At his inaugural presidential banquet, after a few rounds of celebratory drinks, Francisco surprised his guests by breaking into the French song, passionately belting out a few more additional lyrics he had found in an old tablet that was purchased from Napoleon's collection in France. Turns out the song was formerly in Egyptian, and Francisco took it upon himself to translate. That's right, this motherfucker taught himself Egyptian just to learn this song. He was that dedicated. He was able to find the lyrics Napoleon could remember and translated the next part into Spanish, which stated, Le digo donde ponerlo, nunca le digo donde voy a estar, lo atropellé antes de que una persona me corriera. His performance, while met with a mixture of amusement and bewilderment, I bet it was bewilderment, I bet they were fucking confused as fuck, captured the essence of Francisco's unique blend of ambition, eccentricity, and charisma. He was really trying to turn himself into Napoleon. This instance further cemented his image as a flamboyant leader, offering a hint of the dramatic decisions and events that would come to define his tenure as the president of Paraguay. So, in 1864, as the years of his presidency rolled on, Francisco Solano López began to exhibit a heightened sense of paranoia and suspicion. He suspected a plot against Paraguay involving Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, a perceived conspiracy that set the stage for heightened tensions of the region. He essentially experienced what all fucking dictators and all kings experience. Fear of losing power, and he let that fear get to him. So in a bold move, López issued an ultimatum to Brazil, demanding it refrain from interfering in Uruguay's internal affairs. This ultimatum was a daring display of Paraguay's strength under López's leadership, reflecting his commitment to protecting Paraguay's interests and autonomy. Unfortunately for López, Brazil chose to ignore Paraguay's demand because they're like, fucking, who's this guy? This guy ain't shit. This dismissal, perceived as a direct affront or insult, further fueled López's fears and suspicions. He was like, well, if they're not afraid of me, then fuck, they're gonna move against me. They're gonna steal everything from me. It needs to all be mine. It set the region on an inexorable path toward conflict. While serious geopolitical maneuvers dominated this phase of López's presidency, anecdotes from this period highlight his unique personality. One such story involves his fascination again with Napoleon Bonaparte. He was trying to become him. He wanted to fuck him. According to accounts from his close aides, López had a portrait of Napoleon in his office. He would often be found staring at it, lost in thought, before making important decisions, as if seeking counsel from his idol. Another report says that he was caught one time slowly touching himself as he stared into Napoleon Bonaparte's portrait. This account comes from a maid who was said to have tried to slander him, but also came out and said that he was cheating on his wife, and which turned out to be true. So who knows? He could have been slowly beating himself off to Napoleon. Furthermore, López's passion for the French tongue continued to be a part of his persona. He would send more of his trusted scholars to Egypt to continue the translation of the tablet. And then on December 13th, 1864, on this day, with the deafening beat of war drums echoing in the background, Francisco made a decision that would forever alter the course of Paraguayan history. Ignoring diplomatic avenues, he officially declared war on Brazil, a direct result of their dismissal of his previous ultimatum, which he viewed as a direct insult. And he also said that the Brazilians said he had a tiny penis, which was not true. He definitely didn't. He had the biggest dick in all of Paraguay. This declaration was a catalyst that ignited the fuse of conflict, ultimately escalating into the catastrophic Paraguayan War, which would soon draw in Argentina and Uruguay. So driven by his belief in his Napoleonic destiny, Francisco embarked on this war with the conviction of a leader determined to defend his nation's sovereignty. Yet, his decision was met with apprehension and even resentment within his own country and beyond, marking the beginning of a bloody chapter in South America's history. People were like, "You mean the weird guy who strokes off to Napoleon decided to declare war on a bunch of people? Well, that fucking sucks." That was mostly the apprehension there, I'm guessing. During this period, there's an interesting tale that underscores López's steadfast, albeit misguided, determination. Just before the declaration of war, it is said that López gathered his closest advisors for a war council. He presented his plan to declare war, meeting the word glances of his advisors with steely resolve. At one point, one of his advisors, visibly anxious, questioned the wisdom of the decision, pointing out the superior resources and manpower of the Brazilian military. Very logical and, making a rash decision. In response, López reportedly beat the fuck out of him and was like, "No, fuck you," and then made him stare at a portrait of Napoleon in his office and stated, "Just as he conquered Europe, we will conquer South America. Now suck my big dick. It's not tiny." He was convinced that his penis was huge. Reportedly, it was only, 2 inches. Which, it's 2 inches is like big, right? That's like so big. While this anecdote might be the product of folklore and historical interpretation, it provides a fascinating insight into the mindset of López as he led Paraguay into this very deadly war. So speaking of the war, let's go ahead and get into it now, right? December 13th, 1864. This date is seared into the history of South America as the day when Paraguay, under the leadership of Francisco, declared war on Brazil, as we know. The Paraguayan War, which is also known as the War of the Triple Alliance, is a conflict that is considered to be among the deadliest in South American history. López's decision again was met with many critics, many inside and outside Paraguay, who would question his wisdom. However, again, he was just convinced by his Napoleonic destiny. He's had lots of visions at this point. I really think he might have been a little schizophrenic. And I think his dad knew that, which is why he was grooming his younger brother to be his heir. But when his younger brother died, Carlos was like, well, shit. Fuck it, I guess good old crazy Francisco, who thinks he's Napoleon's got to be the leader now. One story from this period encapsulates López's single-minded determination. When his decision was met, again with more criticism later on, right before they started fighting, López is said to have pointed at a map of South America, tracing his finger across Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina, and Uruguay. He would say, "Our destiny is to unite South America under one flag, our flag." But again, whether this gesture was born of delusions of grandeur or a deep-seated belief in Paraguay's destiny, it was a chilling harbinger of the bloody conflict to come. So on April 13th of 1865, this day brought a new wave of turmoil for Paraguay under Francisco López. Having already declared war on Brazil just months prior, Paraguay's declaration of war against Argentina marked a significant escalation of the conflict. His generals were already like, well, fuck, I don't know if we can handle Brazil. And López was like, we're going to declare war on more people. Decided to declare war on Argentina. Displaying audacious resolve, López didn't just declare war, but also launched an invasion into the Argentine territory. This very audacious move had profound geopolitical implications, as Argentina and Uruguay quickly joined Brazil in forming the Triple Alliance against Paraguay. They weren't about to do it when it was just Brazil versus Paraguay, but after, being a piece of shit and pulling this against Argentina, they were like, yeah, okay, let's fuck them up. United in their opposition to the escalating aggression of López's regime, the three nations signed the Treaty of the Triple Alliance, in which they pledged to fight until the López regime was overthrown. Something that I feel like should happen with Korea, but we'll get into that later. In the midst of this rapidly intensifying conflict, stories from this period shed light on López's unwavering self-belief. It is said that on the night before the declaration of war against Argentina, López had a vivid dream about Napoleon Bonaparte. In the dream, Napoleon stripped down, got all hot and sweaty. And López is said to have also stripped down, and Napoleon complimented him on his nipples, saying, "Those are the tiniest goddamn nipples I've ever seen." And López was like, "Yeah? Do you want to see the tiniest thing that you will ever have seen in your life?" And he began to unzip his pants. And then Napoleon commented on López's bravery and assured him of his victory in the forthcoming war. And Napoleon also wanted to know if he was able to find out more of the lyrics of that song, to which Francisco said yes. His scholars had come back and was able to translate more of the lyrics, which is "Parlez de mer, morts ta lever demandes un voiture pendant que vous montez servite. Pendant que vous montez servite, tout ne doit jamais les passer province, il a déjà pris cette direction avant de venir." And while singing this, Francisco said that Napoleon began to smile and sang along with him. Emboldened by this dream, so fucking crazy. That's just insane to think about, right? Oh man, this guy would constantly dream about Napoleon and tell his commanders everything's fine. We're going to win this war because Napoleon's ghost told me we're going to win. Oh man, I would have just killed myself straight up. I would have been fuck this. I'm already going to die. I know I'm going to die. I don't want to die getting stabbed to death. I'm just going to take a quick route out. But yeah, again, emboldened by the dream, López woke up the next morning with renewed vigor and called for a meeting with his generals. During the meeting, he recounted his dream to his generals, proudly stating, "Bonaparte himself assured our victory. We shall not fail." But he began muttering the lyrics to himself, asking himself, what does it mean? What does it mean? Not fully understanding what the song was about. This belief would have far-reaching consequences in the years to come. So on June 11th of 1865, this day marked a turning point in the Paraguayan War. The Battle of Riachuelo, an extensive naval confrontation, brought about a catastrophic defeat for the Paraguayan Navy at the hands of the Brazilian forces. Because again, the Brazilians had a lot more navy and they had a lot more resources and shit that they could use. The Paraguayan fleet, once a symbol of the nation's power and prestige, was left in complete fucking ruins. Because again, maybe Francisco isn't Napoleon and doesn't know how to, do the maneuvers that he did. Or maybe the Napoleon maneuvers had been studied so much at that point that it was kind of fucking pointless to try and mimic. The loss was a significant blow to López's ambitions and Paraguay's military standing in the war. This defeat on the waters of the Paraná River demonstrated the stark power disparity between Paraguay and the Triple Alliance, particularly Brazil's superior naval forces. The battle had severe implications for the war, which crippled Paraguay's capacity to control the rivers, which were vital supply and communication routes. If they did not have those, they were fucked. And now they were completely fucked. So, despite this grim reality of the loss that they had, stories from this period underscore López's unwavering determination. Faced with the news of the defeat, López is said to have responded with a defiant resolve. In a meeting with his advisors following the Battle of Riachuelo, he reportedly declared, "Even if we have to fight on foot, we will not surrender." Which I'm sure just made them so happy to hear. I bet that, I could not imagine being in that room, realizing that we lost, what had to have been Paraguay's, pride and joy, which was their navy, and they completely lost it. Oh, man, this guy was fucking nuts. It was also around this time that an aide supposedly found López practicing the French song late into the night, as if trying to just draw inspiration from it. The aide reported that López, upon noticing him, simply stated, "Napoleon's spirit is with us. We will prevail." And then as he continued the song, he would just turn and look at the aide and was like, "What does it mean? What does it fucking mean? Tell me!" Again, just... it really reflected the immense pressure growing and growing desperation López was facing following this pivotal battle, which I'm sure he was able to keep a cool, calm, collected appearance in front of other people, but inside, as demonstrated here by this story, he was crumbling. So on September 22nd of 1865 to July 18th of 1866, this period in the Paraguayan War was characterized by the siege of Uruguayana, a prolonged military blockade that would prove to be a critical event in the first phase of the conflict. A Paraguayan garrison found itself encircled and besieged by the forces of the Triple Alliance in the Brazilian city of Uruguayana. I should have looked up how to pronounce that. But it's Spanish. I speak Spanish. I should know how to pronounce it. God damn it. Anyways, the siege was a difficult test of resilience and resourcefulness for the trapped Paraguayan forces. Cut off from reinforcements and supplies, the soldiers faced immense pressure from the surrounding Triple Alliance forces. The ordeal finally came to an end on July 18th of 1866, when the Paraguayan garrison, out of options and resources, surrendered, which is something they should have done at the start of the fucking war. Really, after they lost their navy, they should have just completely surrendered. But no, Francisco's like, I'm going to win. Doesn't matter how many men I lose, I will win, god damn it. The siege of Uruguay marked the end of the first phase of the Paraguayan War, a period dominated by Paraguayan offenses. From this point forward, the tide of the war began to turn against Paraguay, as the forces of the Triple Alliance began to take the initiative. During this period, there's a very curious story about López that is worth recounting. As the siege of Uruguay was taking place, López was hundreds of miles away in Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, waiting for news from the front lines. As the days turned into weeks, and then months, López reportedly took to walking the halls of his palace late at night, muttering to himself in French. Servants claimed they could hear fragments of the mysterious French song he had been translating. Despite the setbacks on the battlefield, it seemed López was still clinging to his Napoleonic destiny. Even as the reality of the war was becoming increasingly grim, his commitment to his vision for Paraguay remained completely unshaken. So, he was determined and resolved, or really it was just a little bit of his ego being like, no, I'm the best. I will be Napoleon. I am Napoleon. I love Napoleon. But, dictators and crazy people, it's just normal shit that they do. At this point, it should be kind of standard and, not surprise a lot of people. So in December of 1866 through July of 1867, this period in the Paraguayan War is marked by the relentless siege of Humaita, a strategic fortification along the Paraguay River, was considered the Gibraltar of South America for strategic location and formidable defenses. However, the siege that began in December of 1866 would bring devastating consequences for Paraguay. For more than 7 months, the soldiers at Humaita resisted the forces of the Triple Alliance, clinging to their post despite heavy artillery fire and deteriorating conditions. Despite their heroic defense, they suffered heavy casualties. The protracted siege culminated in a grim surrender as the defenders were left with no choice but to yield. During this crucial time, President López was at his presidential residence, just chilling, fucking relaxing as a bunch of people are dying. The Palacio de los López, which is what they called his palace, anxiously waiting for news from the front lines. Reports suggest that during this period, he experienced intense periods of despair and exhilaration, oscillating between defiant confidence and deep anxiety. It's also during this period that another story goes on, because as the siege wore on and the reports grew increasingly grim, López supposedly took to spending long hours alone in his study, engrossed in translating the elusive French song that had been haunting him since his visit to Europe. He kept wondering, what does it mean? What does it all mean? Why does Napoleon need me to translate this if I don't translate this completely? And so he kept studying Egyptian, wasting his goddamn time doing that. Eventually finding more references and more lyrics, seemingly referring to women's body parts and genitalia, constantly overshadowing the full emphasis of the song, which he tried to comprehend and understand why Napoleon was so, obsessed with this. Servants reported that he would often emerge from his study with his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, fervently whispering lines of the French song as if it held some mystical key to his destiny. Which, oh my God, that'd be so scary, being one of the servants there. The losses at Humetia represented a significant turning point in the war, marking the beginning of the end for Paraguay. However, despite these heavy blows, López's belief in his Napoleonic destiny never wavered, going so far as to start recruiting citizens and conscripting them essentially to fight in this war, getting every single man that he could into the war, leaving Paraguay really without a bunch of men and leaving a bunch of women and children at home. So even as reality of the defeat started to sink in, his determination to fight to the end remained resolute, setting the stage for the final chapters of the Paraguayan War. So in August 1867 through the July of 1868, the relentless resistance put forth by the Paraguayan forces during the siege of Humaitá was kind of going towards its advanced stages, with the stronghold remaining as one of the few bastions of Paraguayan defenses against the Triple Alliance's onslaught. In these dire circumstances, the defenders managed to stave off the Alliance's offensive for nearly a year. Tales of their resilience under punishing artillery barrages, dwindling supplies, and mounting casualties continued to captivate historians. The spirit of the resistance reflected the national sentiment embodied by President López, the determination to fight to the last man for a war that López started for really no fucking reason other than he was paranoid. It was at this time, too, that Liza Lynch, López's mistress, really wife during this time, was with him constantly trying to soothe him and calm him. They had 6 kids together by this point, and his oldest was being promoted to colonel, which is, that's cool. More nepotism. And however, this staunch resistance couldn't stave off the inevitable for long. And in July of 1868, after more than a year and a half of the siege, the formidable Paraguayan forces finally succumbed. The fall of Humaitá marked a significant victory for the Triple Alliance, signaling a severe blow to the military might and morale of Paraguay. Everyone at this point was fucking done. They were like, we're not winning. We're fighting to live now. We're fighting so we don't have our shit taken over. During this period, a very noteworthy story about Francisco came about. With news of the impending fall of Humaitá, López retreated to his study for days and was there really contemplating on the loss of all the lives that he forced to fight in this, needless, senseless war. And it was there that he was finally able to realize just how wrong he had been about his translation of the French song that he was working on. And when he finally emerged, servants reported a visible change in him. His countenance was said to be of somber determination, his eyes reflecting the toll the war had taken, and yet in the hands he held the complete translation of the French song, a testament to his unwavering belief in his destined greatness. Even as his nation was losing one of its greatest strongholds, he was able to fully translate that song. And this song would later be recovered in modern times and translated into a song that we all know, which I'll get into a little later. Well, I'll play the full song with the French translation and then the Spanish translation. The fall of Humaitá however, was not the end of Paraguay's struggle. It marked the beginning of a new phase in the war, a grim phase that would test the resolve of López and his nation like never before. And so December 6, 1868, the Battle of Ytorro marks a significant moment. It is the day that Francisco Solano López makes the bold decision to lead his troops personally on the battlefield, in what would turn out to be a grim day for the Paraguayan forces. Determined to prove his leadership and revive the spirit of his weary soldiers, López threw himself into the thick of the battle, straight up was like, you know what, fuck it, we're losing, and you need a leader with you. So this is probably like one of the actual badass things he does during this war, instead of just translating a song, you know. He rode at the head of his troops, his commanding presence on the battlefield providing a stark image of bravery and resolve. It was a courageous gesture reflecting his deeply ingrained belief in his Napoleonic destiny. However, the reality of this situation was brutal. The Paraguayan forces, already diminished and demoralized by the fall of Humaita, were severely outnumbered. The Triple Alliance forces, buoyed by their recent victory, pressed on with relentless ferocity. The ensuing battle was one-sided, culminating in a bitter defeat for the Paraguayan forces. It was reported that following defeat, López, although visibly shaken, showed a stoic front. He retired to his quarters, barely escaping with his life, by the way. He barely escaped. And according to his personal valet, spent the night pacing and just murmuring the French lyrics that had come to symbolize his indomitable spirit. You know, just being like, le digo donde ponerlo, le digo donde ponerlo, te le digo donde ponerlo. And then he realized the song wasn't for a man to sing, it was for a woman. And so he had his wife start to sing the song, and it began to make more sense to him. He kind of unraveled more of the mystery. The Battle of Ytorro was not just a military defeat. It was the stark reminder of the immense challenges facing López in Paraguay. But even as the odds seemed insurmountable, López's resolve remained unbroken. His belief in his destiny, while tested, continued to guide his decisions, setting the stage for the harrowing final stages of the Paraguayan War. And on December 21st of 1868 through March 1st of 1869, the brutal chapter of the Battle of Lomas Valentinas, also known as the Battle of Ita-Ipate, unfolds during this period. This prolonged confrontation, lasting over 2 months, ends with a decisive victory for the Triple Alliance, pushing the Paraguayan forces closer to the precipice of annihilation. And I do mean annihilation. At this point, most of the guys in Paraguay were fucking dead. Like they're probably, I think at this point they had lost like 40% of all their men in Paraguay, just straight up dudes. And despite that, López, still unbroken in his spirit, is once again at the heart of the fray. Amidst the fiery chaos of artillery, the clash of steel, and the agonizing cries of the wounded, López is a figure of obstinate defiance. His belief in his destiny and the will to resist against all odds persist, providing a stark contrast against the grim reality of the battlefield. This guy is literally insane. He does not know when to give up. He's like, we will fight to the last man, and he fucking meant it. Oh, that's crazy. I hope we never have a leader like that in America, where it's like, no, just know when to give up, know when you're beat. God damn it. Despite their gallant resistance, the Paraguayan forces are heavily decimated. Reports from the field detail the grotesque spectacle of destruction, an earthy, brutal testament to the relentless carnage of war. The undermanned and under-equipped Paraguayan forces bear the brunt of the assault, their numbers dwindling at an alarming rate. In the climax of this deadly confrontation, López barely escapes with his life. As the enemy closed in, he managed to evade capture in a dramatic escape that has since become the stuff of his legend. His escape, although crucial for his continued resistance, further exposes the desperate situation of the Paraguayan forces. The aftermath of the Battle of Lomas Valentinas marks a bleak moment for Paraguay. With their forces heavily decimated and their leader on the run, the end seems inevitable. Yet, amidst the ruins, the spirit of resistance lingers, personified by López, a man still clinging to his vision of destiny against the ruthless tide of reality. And yeah, again, Francisco was living in a fantasy at this point. Like everybody was dying or dead. A bunch of his people were like, well, fuck this, and like defected. And on March 1st of 1870, on a hill known as Cerro Corá, the final act of Francisco Solano López's tumultuous reign in the bitter Paraguayan War plays out. The battle, intense and swift, concludes with a dramatic event that leaves an indelible mark on the nation's history: the death of President López. As stated at the opening of this show, López was resolute to the end. He faced the encroaching forces of the Triple Alliance with a last stand reminiscent of his oft-invoked hero Napoleon Bonaparte. His resistance, however, proves futile against the overwhelming odds. I am talking, it's like 10,000 to 1, essentially. In a tragic denouement, López is killed, his dream of a powerful, autonomous Paraguay dying with him on the battlefield. His wife, Eliza, and his son, his oldest son, were taken prisoner. And as the news of López's demise spreads, it sends shockwaves across the nation. For some, it brings an end to an era marked by tyranny and war, while for others, it signals the loss of a defiant leader who dared to stand up against larger forces. Regardless of the sentiments, one fact remains undisputed: Paraguay stands on the precipice of a new era. With López's death marking the end of the Paraguayan War, the country is left devastated. The war has taken a severe toll on its population, economy, and infrastructure. The once prosperous nation is now a shadow of its former self, bearing the scars of a conflict that has forever altered its course. Yet, even amidst the ruins, the resilient spirit of Paraguay persists, and its spirit that will guide the nation through the hardships of rebuilding and the challenges of reinvention. A spirit embodied in the enduring memory of Francisco Solano López, a deeply flawed, yet undeniably influential figure whose story is as complex and captivating as the history of Paraguay itself. The war was one of the bloodiest in Latin American history, and it had a lasting impact on Paraguay, decimating its population and economy. So much so that 70% of its men, straight up just its dudes, were fucking killed. And this completely would alter the balance of power in the region. This marks the end of this part of the quarrel. So let's go ahead and let's get into its aftermath and the effects that it would have in the future. Let's go ahead and get into the aftermath here of the Paraguayan War and its impact. So everything past 1870. The aftermath of the Paraguayan War reveals the nation in ruins. The war had been a catastrophic event for Paraguay, resulting in the decimation of its population, utter destruction of its infrastructure and economy. The once bustling cities and fertile farmlands now lay in ashes, bearing witness to the horrors of a conflict that pushed the nation to the brink of extinction. Estimates suggest that Paraguay lost nearly 60 to 70% of its population during the war, with some figures suggesting that the male population was particularly affected, with as much as 90% perishing in the conflict. This drastic reduction left a severe demographic imbalance that would influence Paraguayan society for generations. The population loss also meant a significant loss of workforce, which further compounded the economic devastation. The war completely fucked over the main populace. Everyone just got screwed, mostly because of all the people it lost. It lost almost all of its dudes, which is a huge workforce, and there's a lot of people that need to be out there working fields, farming, and unfortunately during that time, a lot of women did not at the time. It was not socially acceptable to be doing something that's perceived as like a man's job. But they would quickly stop giving a shit about that. Economically, the country was bankrupted. They did not have any more money. Its productive sectors were almost entirely wiped out. Paraguay's debt grew while its ability to generate income diminished. dramatically. It would take decades for the country to recover. And even then, it could not regain its pre-war prosperity. Like, the country was actually doing pretty well before this shit went down. Politically, the war ended the López dynasty's autocratic rule, paving the way for a period of political instability. Multiple governments rose and fell in the subsequent years, with each trying to navigate the challenging task of national reconstruction, while dealing with the internal strife and external pressures that were caused by all of its debt and all the other shit that the López dynasty caused. For the victors of the war, Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, the consequences were mixed. While they succeeded in overthrowing the López regime, the war was costly in terms of lives lost and resources expended. Brazil and Argentina incurred heavy debts, which strained their economies. Moreover, the territorial gains made post-war led to further disputes among the Triple Alliance members, particularly between Argentina and Brazil. Despite their victory, the Triple Alliance countries were internationally criticized for their conduct during the war and for the severe terms of the peace treaty, which further impoverished Paraguay. Which is kind of hilarious because a lot of the international people doing that would be like, America, England, France, Spain, just kind of like shitting on them. But then like not that much later, they would do the exact same shit to Germany. So hypocrites. These nations also had to grapple with the internal consequences of the war, such as political destabilization, social unrest, and a veteran population dealing with the traumas of a bloody conflict. Yes, that really did fuck with them quite a bit, I bet. In the grand scheme of South American history, the Paraguayan War altered the balance of power on the continent. It confirmed Brazil's position as a regional power, revealed Argentina's ambitions, and left Paraguay marginalized. The war, in many ways, set the stage for future geopolitical dynamics in the region. In a twist of fate, the historical tablet that once belonged to Francisco Solano López would not disappear into obscurity. Instead, centuries later, it would resurface in the most unexpected of places. That's right. In the 21st century, a copy of the inscriptions on this very tablet, the song that López strived to translate and fully did, found its way to two powerful women of music. The song, the inscriptions, which López once believed to be a strategic key to power, became the cornerstone for Nicki Minaj and Cardi B's chart-topping hit WAP. This empowering anthem of female sexuality and confidence stormed the global music charts. Oh, man. Yeah, that's right. That's right. If you go back and you listen to the words and you go and try and translate it, here, let me just read you the lyrics to the mystical French Napoleon Bonaparte song, right? So, after the opening here, where it's whores in this house, there's some whores in this house. I said certified freak, 7 days a week, wet ass pussy, make that pull-out game weak. Whoa, yeah, you fucking with some wet ass pussy. Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet ass pussy. Give me everything you got for this wet ass pussy. Beat it up, catch change, extra large and extra hard. Put this pussy right in your face. Swipe your nose like a credit card. Hop on top, I want to ride. I do a Kegel while it's inside. Spit in my mouth, look at my eyes. This pussy's wet, come take a dive. The part that I had Francisco agonizing over was specifically the gobble me, swallow me, drip down the side of me. Yeah, quick jump out before you let it get inside of me. Yeah. That part was the one that he was freaking out over. So, you're welcome. You're welcome, audience. That I made you think there was some mystical. I had you think there was some mystical French song. But anyways, so as we revel in the beat of the modern anthem, we must. I need you all to consider something that's much more unsettling, because Francisco believed that the song inscribed on this ancient tablet would grant him the prowess of Napoleon Bonaparte. What do you think this could mean for Minaj and Cardi B then, huh? Who have fully realized and popularized the song. I mean, think about it. The song could confer upon them the Napoleonic legacy of power and dominance, right? We were probably going to live in a world where Nicki Minaj and Cardi B are in charge of it. Oh my God. I wrote this bit to be a lot more serious, but I can't. Sorry, I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun just doing that straight for a while, but I can't anymore. Could you fucking imagine if Nicki Minaj was just like some military genius? Like same with Cardi B now, and they're just gathering resources and preparing for a war on the world. So that will bring us towards the end here. I want you guys to realize that in conclusion, the Paraguayan War stands as one of the most destructive conflicts in Latin American history, leaving a legacy of devastation and loss, but also the resilience and rebirth. The memory of this brutal conflict serves as a somber reminder of the cost of war and enduring challenges of peace. One that we can only pray that Nicki Minaj and Cardi B will remember before our world is devastated by their military prowess. This ends today's historical quarrel.